Hi, I'm Andrea Klim, and you're watching Turn to the Stars. And as I'm recording today, the date is Monday, July 9th, 2018. And I thought it was really important to try to get a broadcast out to you before the eclipses start entering in. We're entering into eclipse season, and this summer being extraordinarily unusual, as we have 3 eclipses that will be manifesting. So what does that look like for us? That's an important topic to talk about. So I wanted to just talk about the location and show you the charts, and just probably talk about the first solar eclipse at the beginning of the show. And that is when that's occurring, how long it's occurring, what it means. And as I've done in past shows, you've seen me talk about eclipses and in what they mean. And so really, new moons that we have every month are sort of like seeds that plant the energy for new experiences, new beginnings in our lives. But eclipses are like super new moons. Some people call them wild cards, dramatic wild cards, because of the change that they inspire, that they ignite, that they usher into our lives. So I always recommend to people that it's a really good idea to take a look at your astrology prior to these eclipses so that you have a good understanding. That's what astrology is. It's meant to be a tool that helps us to understand and navigate with ease rather than more discomfort. So I would describe this first eclipse in a way that would help you to understand it more. It is going to be a new moon or a partial solar eclipse in the constellation of Cancer. And so it is creating new emotional cycles, and it's really an opportunity to reset our goals and our intentions wherever it takes place in our charts. So the date that this is happening, and let me just bring that chart out, is between July 12th and July 13th, depending on where you're at on Earth. And I am recording from Mount Dora, Florida, so I'm going to give you some times that are parallel to or actually occurring where these eclipses are occurring here in Ocala, Florida, being close to us. So actually July 12th and 13th is the time of the partial solar eclipse that's in the constellation of Cancer. And it actually starts at about 9:48 at night and ends at about 12:13 a.m. on the 13th. And that's according to Ocala. And it's going to be visible south in the southern part of Australia, Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. And the duration of the solar eclipse is about 2 hours. So historically, eclipses, the duration of them is said to affect the effects to last about that long in our lives. So the effects of this eclipse could be said to last about 2 years. Now, it's important to understand, I'm going to show you a picture of this chart right now, and you can see the solar eclipse is right here, where my finger is, and it is in an exact opposition, I'm going to have to say right here, to Pluto. And that's a very, very, very powerful aspect to be occurring on a solar eclipse. Pluto is a planet that brings incredible transformation. It is retrograde. So there's this real inner process that's going on of transformation for people on a soul level. And there's this total restructuring or sort of internal taking apart and looking at the way things are working. And with this opposition to the solar eclipse on July 12th, 13th, it's going to be that there's a lot of awareness that comes from others, from outside situations, and in relationships. It's oppositions are things that really raise our awareness to the other and the other to us. And the sign of Cancer is about the family. It is about the soul. It is about the roots of our origin. It is about our home, our domestic life. And so there's these outside influences that are showing up on this eclipse that are indicating that we're going to see changes that seem to just come out of nowhere. And if you are somebody who's born around the 12th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th of any month, you're going to feel and experience the changes that are indicated by this solar eclipse. Solar eclipses affect us as far as our sense of identity. So something about our identity changes on an eclipse. And this one is also, I have to mention, even though the intensity is going to be very profound, it also, though, does bring up, just prior to the eclipse, there's a grand trine in water, which is a great sensitivity for people everywhere, compassion, understanding, and so people are very compassionate and in understanding of the changes that we're each experiencing. And on this eclipse, though, I did want to mention that that Jupiter is in the sign of Scorpio on this eclipse, and it has just woken up as I'm speaking today, July 9th. It just woke up from its long retrograde and 5.5-month retrograde, and it's moving ahead in the constellation of Scorpio. Scorpio has everything to do with change, transformation, sort of leaving your old skin and growing a new skin, identifying areas of our lives that need some types of transformation. And the interesting thing about Scorpio is it's about sex, death, transformation, but it's also about other people's money. And I have to look at this as, investments, monies that we save and we invest in certain areas. And because it's squaring Mercury, it's just past the square, I have to talk with you just a little bit about the stock market. I'm not a financial astrologer, but there's a lot of talk and a lot of people really talking about the stock market, and that it is a strong possibility with these eclipses that it's going to drop. And so it would be wise for people to take a look at your portfolio and possibly consider the cryptocurrency as an alternative until the stock market rises back up, which is indicated by astrology to happen by fall. So I wanted to bring that up because that's been a big topic, and especially with Jupiter waking up in Scorpio. That means that we are going to expand at forward movement and things are changing. So let's consider that change. And Scorpio is, other people's money, investments. It's mortgage companies, banks, lending institutions, all the areas where money is in a big concern. And it is a big concern all across the world. But I did want to mention that during today's show. With all these changes coming up, that has been a huge conversation in the astrology community. And it's interesting, too, that on this solar eclipse, not only do we see a grand trine in water, which does bring about that compassion, empathy. People are really, really sensitive to each other. And then we also see a grand trine between Uranus and Taurus in the second house of this astrology chart, which is indicating changes in our finances. And it trines Saturn, which is retrograde in Capricorn in the 10th house, which means the business world. And then it also trines Venus. So there is this flow of material, prosperity. And so we have to consider that as well. And that is between, the work areas, our job opportunities, careers, and the flow of money. And I mean, Uranus is the planet that actually brings changes, things more like erratic, unusual, unexpected things to happen. So the chart is indicating that we're flowing with these changes. However, it also indicates, though, that we are at a crossroads with this eclipse. Pluto in Capricorn means that the government and the structures of government are changing, and that there are effects to families as a whole. So we have to, and it's interesting because the solar eclipse is actually occurring in the 5th house of this chart, which means children. Children and families are being affected, that there is changes on a large scale, and that the awareness of the government, and it's actually coming from the government, and the power and the control from the government that's affecting the families. And we're seeing that all around on the news. So I did want to talk about that it's part of some of the changes that we can expect on the solar eclipse. And I do want to talk a little bit about the lunar eclipse. And this is a total lunar eclipse that's coming up on July 27th. And it is actually a very, very powerful lunar eclipse. It occurs on a full moon, and it's a total lunar eclipse because it is passing right between the sun and the moon. So it's going to be totally blocking the light that is reflected on the moon. So it's said to be the strongest lunar eclipse in 120 years. Now, lunar eclipses typically affect relationships. They inspire changes in relationships. And now this one is what we call a south node lunar eclipse. And the other interesting factor about this is that Mars is in the constellation of Aquarius, and it is right beside this total lunar eclipse. And it is retrograde. So there's a lot of components here that are really active. Mars is the planet of action. It is the planet of movement, the animal within each of us. And it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is a intellectual sign. It's the sign of everyone. It's a sign of the collective. It's a sign of the intelligence that's within us. So with Mars retrograde, Mars likes to be moving ahead. And it is one of the planets that is closest to us here on Earth. And at this eclipse on July 27th, it is very close to us here on Earth. So we're calling this eclipse one that's red because of the Mars influence. But if you want to look into that scientifically, it's actually because of the refraction of light that causes that red appearance. However, total lunar eclipse with Mars retrograde right next to it South Node means that there are going to be things in relationships, things emotionally that we are going to be becoming aware of, things from the past that are going to surface that perhaps that we've experienced some type of trauma around. And so with this in the sign of Aquarius, it gives us the opportunity to communicate and to brainstorm, to talk, to use our intellectual faculties to understand and get to the bottom of some of these experiences. And I want to show you a chart of that eclipse. That eclipse is right here, and you can see it where my finger is pointing to right down here. Mars retrograde, lunar eclipse, south node. Very, very powerful lunar eclipse. And we're going to talk about the aspects or the influences by other planets to it, but it starts on July 27th. And its duration is about 6 hours. And so it starts about 1:14 p.m. and it ends at 7:28 p.m. And that's, according to Ocala, Florida. And again, this is 6 hours long. So that does indicate that 6 years of change that's rooted with this eclipse. And the other thing that is, this eclipse didn't write down where this one was occurring. I only wrote down where the solar eclipses are occurring. So I'll have to write that in the explanation or the description below the broadcast. So, but it is really important that let's just take a look at this chart here, this lunar eclipse chart, because it is again a great indicator of where changes are going to be happening. It's happening again in, and I didn't say this earlier, it's happening in the 3rd house of the chart. So that means that it's affecting our ability mentally to discuss things in a very intellectual way, to sort things out. I always think of Aquarius as the one who's the strategist. So truly, it would be really helpful for us to use intellectual strategies in ways that are good for everyone, the collective, that in ways that are good for our friends, in ways that are good for our community, talk, communicate, discuss things. And this eclipse is indicating that we are going to have some stressors with some really unexpected events that will cause us to grow and learn and to, really take our time in working through things that have to do with children. Again, Uranus is in the 5th house here. And so that's indication of children, our creative expression, recognition. There's going to be some unusual, unexpected things that could occur. And now when we have Mars involved, we have to consider the attributes of Mars, and Mars can be war, Mars can be attack. So I would say that this is probably going to be more verbal than anything because of the Aquarius energy that Mars is in. And then we also see on this eclipse, we also see that, lunar eclipses are always occurring on full moon, so they're always exactly opposite the sun. And so, the North Node is with the sun, indicating that law and rules and the truth and really studying directions that are righteous and that come from the heart and are fair, and where there's children involved especially. And you know, that's all over the news. We're seeing a lot of things on the news about children, the children that are trapped in the cave, that they're being rescued as I speak. So there are some real challenges that are showing up emotionally for many people. So really the best strategy is to use the intellectual faculties to resolve the crisis that are happening around this lunar eclipse. And I'm going to save, you know, the next solar eclipse I'm going to want to talk to you about, and I'll probably do another show on this, will be August 11th. And again, this is a partial solar eclipse, and it's going to be over Northeast Europe, Northwest Asia, North and North America, Atlantic, the Arctic. So this one here is in Leo, and it's at 18 degrees of Leo. So I'm going to talk in depth about that on my next show. And where is the chart for that? I have it here, August 11th. So that one is got Mercury retrograde right next to it. And Mercury retrograde is another aspect of an important time that we need to consider our decisions, and that would be basically between July 26th and August 18th. That's Mercury's retrograde, and it is going to be in the sign of Leo, which is communication, thinking, researching, redoing, revisiting areas of our lives that have to do with our expression, have to do with children, have to do with creating, have to do with being recognized. So if you've got any decisions to make and you're thinking that about making a decision between the 26th and the 18th, it might be in your best interest, it will be in your best interest to reconsider and use this time to research rather than to having to go back and redo things that you made decisions on during this time. So that's a very important, that's a very important date in July. Very important for us to know that Jupiter in Scorpio is now awake. We now have forward movement. We do have this expansion. We do have this sort of like blowing up. Things are ballooned around Scorpio areas. Scorpio areas are areas of life, death, transformation. Areas of sexuality are going to be huge. Areas of investing your money, and where is your money? Is it safe? Do we need to change it? Do we need to look at that? This is something that's fixed. That means that it is not something that is just going to mutate and go away. This is important. So I just wanted to talk about these things before the next show, mostly of what July is bringing. And very important to consider your actions very carefully. Might feel very tired with Mars retrograde because Mars is about our outward motion. And when the planet is saying, go inside, slow it down, you know, your actions are not meant to be so outward driven. Take time to read, to rest, to strategize, look at things in fragments and put them together, and those responses could lead to intellectually good responses and decisions made. So I wanted to just go over that with you on today's broadcast on Turn to the Stars. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about was my first book I've just published. It's called Trapped Souls, A Story of Healing. This is a true story of a healing experience, or a ghost clearing experience that I did last year in June. And it took place at the Lake County Historical Museum, which is located in Tavares. And this picture is actually the front of the museum as you walk in. And it's a really great museum. It has lots of historical exhibits. There's 4 different rooms. And so in this book, you're going to read the true story of my ghostly encounters at the museum, and what I did, and how that unfolded. And I use a couple of different tools when I do ghost clearing. One of them is I create a horary chart, and that is a chart that is based upon the birth of a question. And so you'll see that chart in this book, and you'll get a complete story of what happened there. And it does keep your attention. It's not a big book, but it's a powerful book. And so I hope that you'll go on Amazon.com and type in Trapped Souls, A Story of Healing by Andrea Klim, and hope you'll purchase it and read it and enjoy it and give me your reviews on it. I'd really appreciate it. It's one of a series of many, many stories that I have from years and years of this type of work and doing ghost clearings. And it's my belief that if you have a ghost that's showing themselves to you in your home and they're moving things around, that means they want your attention. And that means that most of the time, they're trapped here for some reason or other. It means that they have not been able to find a restful place, a peaceful, restful place to go. And I say, we each have a heaven. And when you find a spirit, or as we say, ghost, as we label these poor spirits and souls that are trapped, they each have an idea of what heaven might look like to them. And so that's where I come in, and that's the type of work that I do, as well as astrology guidance for people. So anyway, the name of my book is Trapped Souls, A Story of Healing, and it's a true story, and I hope that you'll take a look at it and enjoy it. Until next time, I want to encourage you to turn to the stars and know that you will find answers there. Know that you'll find guidance there. It's the systems around us that show us the systems within us, that help us understand the systems within us. So until the next time, be well. And remember, turn to the stars and you'll find your answers there.